Right. Anyway, so it's, one of the things I always liked about Ajahn Brahm, he always said, enjoy your food. Yeah. Because sometimes you have monastics and they try to be really tough, and they kind of take all the food and mix together in a bucket, that kind of thing. Yeah. And Ajahn Brahm never recommended that. He said, enjoy your food. That's why I went to Bodhinyana Monastery. It's interesting, this whole idea about restraint, yeah, understanding it in the right way. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying your food. What you should not be doing is kind of think about food at other times. That's when it's a problem. But actually, I think if you enjoy it, you actually tend to think less about it. But if you try to be really tough and don't taste the food, don't, then you think about it all the time because what you have is kind of, I think it's par for the course. Anyway, so let us get back to the what we're doing here. So we have this the gradual training. You have the in brief there the various aspects of it. And so what I want to do now is I want to have a look at comparison, comparing it to the Noble Eightfold Path, and see how it compares to that. So let's see what we have here. So we've already seen all of this. And then comes the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, so there you have it. Yeah, so let's see how this compares. So first of all, we have right view. And right view is here in the gradual training. It is exemplified by the arising of the Buddha, which, as I said, is the becoming available of right view in the world. Before the Buddha arises, there is no right view. There is partial right view. There are some aspects that are true, but there's not the full right view. The complete right view doesn't exist. And it is that complete right view which gives makes it possible to practice the path all the way to the end. Yeah? If you haven't got the complete right view, then you're going to be stuck somewhere, and that is the problem. And so it is very important to have the full right view, and it's very simple to understand why right view is so important. Because it's always like that in life. If you have the right view and right understanding of something, you can make good choices. Yeah, if you don't understand things in the right way, you're going to make bad choices. If you think that the lunch is upstairs, not downstairs, yeah, you're going to have dukkha, lunch dukkha, because you go upstairs, oh, where's the lunch? I can't find the lunch. Yeah, that's kind of, so simple things like that. If you misunderstand the way things actually are, you're going to suffer as a consequence. You're going to make bad choices. And it's always like that. The more clarity we have things, and this is true in our professional life, it's true in everything, understanding things in the right way is going to lead to good choices. But in the Dhamma, the stakes are much higher than ordinary choices that we make in life. Okay, you put all your money on the wrong company on the stock market and you lose everything. Okay, small thing, right? Is that true? For some people it's a big deal, right? But if you lose the big lottery in life, the kind of lottery of rebirth in the wrong place, or the lottery of not ending samsara, it is far, far worse than losing all your money. And so it's still a fairly small beer compared to the really big things in the world. And so the arising of the Buddha is so important because of this. It makes available the right view. And then the Buddha teaches that. That's kind of giving the right view also to others. So he doesn't just keep it for himself. The Pacceka Buddhas tend to keep it for themselves. They don't teach. Whereas the Sambuddha teaches also to others. That's the distinction between the two. And then the gaining of faith is like it's like almost like you are accepting that view of the Buddha. Yeah, you listen to the Buddha. It says, "Wow, that's really cool," and you have confidence in the Buddha. It means that you're opening your mind up to listening to what the Buddha says. That's kind of the idea of faith and confidence in Buddhism. Without that faith and confidence, you're not really listening, and then you kind of take that on board provisionally. What the Buddha says. And so that's what it means to be a Buddhist. So if the Buddha says there is such a thing as rebirth, take it on board at the very least provisionally. Don't reject it. If you reject it, you're basically saying that I don't believe that the Buddha was awake. And that's really what you're saying, because the Buddha says this is a fundamental part of his awakening experience, is understanding rebirth. And if you reject the awakening of the Buddha, well, that's kind of, you don't have any faith in the Buddha. That's what it means not to have faith in the Buddha, right? So you have to at least take it on board provisionally, while understanding that you don't know it, but it is a matter of faith and confidence when you start out. And that faith gets strengthened over time. It is not as if you kind of have faith once and for all, and then the faith is kind of, that's it. It is gradual. Yeah, faith initially is a bit weak, okay, a bit of confidence, and then over time, as you practice the path, as you see how it works, as you understand the suttas more deeply, that confidence becomes stronger. Yeah, initially you may be unsure about rebirth. A lot of people start out as what they call secular Buddhists. I think that's an oxymoron, secular Buddhist. I don't believe there is such a thing. Yeah, either you're secular or you're Buddhist. You can't be both. But anyway, or either that or all Buddhists are secular Buddhists. Yeah, because I don't think that this distinction between religion and secularism is actually really valid. I think it is maybe valid in some contexts. Maybe valid in medieval Europe, when you had to kind of distinguish between Christian ideas and running the world, yeah, like running from a government point of view, then maybe it was a valid distinction. That's when it arose, the idea of secularism, Middle Ages or 16th, 17th century Europe. But is it really make any sense in terms of Buddhism? I don't think it does, because because it's just different. I'm not going to go into that now, but it's just a different way of thinking about the world, really. And so you gain faith, and that faith develops, and as your faith develops, so does your right view. Right view and faith are two sides of the same coin. They're not really different. Wisdom too, yeah, wisdom, right view, and faith, all of these three are kind of, they revolve around each other, and they're part of the same kind of complex of ideas, if you like. One of the things that's quite unique to the Buddhist teachings, that right view and faith and wisdom are kind of go together in this way. So that's the right view part of the gradual training. Then we have, what do we have then? Then we have Samma Sankappa, yeah, which I translate here as right purpose. So I have been arguing for a long time that right purpose is a good translation for Samma Sankappa. Other people call it right intention, sometimes right thought. But I think right purpose gets to the idea very clearly what this is about. Right aim is another way of translating it. Right goal, even. So I saw to my satisfaction that my friend Bhante Sujato has now started using right purpose as well. Yeah, so I thought I have subliminally conditioned him to use right purpose. I'm very pleased to see that. So right purpose here is going forth. Yeah, now you go forth, meaning that you are getting really serious about the practice, and your purpose now is clearly awakening. That's your purpose, and so you make that change. Your life changes meaning. Before you were kind of living maybe a life where you was more for just the ordinary worldly gratifications, but now it becomes the spiritual path instead. And it does not mean that you have to be a monastic to practice the Noble Eightfold Path or the gradual training. Yeah, so right purpose here can also be the right purpose in lay life. Yeah, so good news, Henry. Yeah, it's not just yeah. So right, so also right purpose in lay life, whereby you are now moving towards the spiritual practice instead, and you're taking that more seriously. It's always kind of a weighing up in life, yeah, because the reality is that life tends to, because we are around other people all the time, it's very easy to be dragged along with the way other people are. We are so heavily conditioned as human beings, and when you are around other people who are there for, to have worldly successes, whether it's becoming wealthy or it's kind of climbing some kind of social hierarchy or whatever it is. It's hard not to be conditioned by that. It's hard not to think a little bit like that. And so that's kind of the hard part, much more difficult in lay life than in monastic life, because you have to kind of be able to withstand those forces in society that lead in a different direction. And because we are not very good at withstanding things, because we are so conditioned by others, that is one of the reasons why it is a great benefit, depending a bit on where you become a monastic. But if you become a monastic in the right place, it's a great benefit because the conditioning is consistently pushing you in the right direction for the right purpose. That's the advantage of that. But still, the idea is the same. And this is why we have organizations like the BF. Yeah, you can come here and get brainwashed a little bit. Yeah. So what a nice thing it is to get brainwashed. Isn't it nice to get brainwashed? Yeah. Get cleaned out. The has a nice double meaning, brainwashing, which I like. Clean yourself out and you get conditioned. That's kind of the meaning behind that. Anyway, so that is the right purpose. Yeah, we're now heading in the right direction here called going forth. Then we have virtuous conduct and contentment. They are equivalent to the next three factors of the Noble Eightfold Path: right speech, right action, right livelihood. Samma vaca, samma kammanta, samma ajiva. Contentment is a little bit hard to place it. It could also be placed later on under right effort, but I prefer to have it here under, I'm not sure why, but that's what I did anyway. So sometimes I do random stuff, and this is one of those random things. So don't take what I say too seriously. Yeah, it's a bit random sometimes. Just be aware of that. Because sometimes there isn't any clear. Sometimes you can take different views on things. Yeah. So don't take what I say as the absolute truth. Yeah. It is a kind of one particular way of looking at things. So that is the ethical conduct, the virtue. Then we have the sense restraint and situational awareness. This is the equivalent to right effort. Right effort is defined as the effort to overcome unwholesome qualities that have arisen, avoid unwholesome qualities that have not yet arisen, stop them from arising, giving rise to wholesome qualities, and giving rise to improving or stabilizing wholesome qualities that have already arisen. And so this is mostly about sense restraint and situational awareness. Yeah, so using metta to overcome negative qualities, holding back, using your wisdom to stop buying into stupid stuff like desiring, silly things. Like when you go down to lunch, don't desire all the food on that table, because I'm going to end up in serious trouble if I do. That sort of thing. Yeah, that's a simple kind of restraint. Did you get as much food as I did, Venerable? Or did you get a little bit less? Not. It's very restrained over there. Eh? Okay, that's good. So that is that, and then we have right mindfulness, which is both seclusion and the abandoning of the five hindrances. I showed you before that how these things are equivalent, how you watch the breath, and that actually helps you to overcome the hindrances. Right mindfulness is a bit more than that. Right mindfulness is also can be contemplation of the body, for example, the 31 parts and the 4 elements, that sort of thing. But essentially, this is where kind of it comes in. So right mindfulness. And that's kind of an important thing to understand. Otherwise, it can be quite hard to understand the gradual training. Once you get that, then you see what's going on here. And it starts with seclusion. Yeah, right mindfulness is what you practice in seclusion. Then we have practicing jhana, which is right stillness, samma samadhi. But what about the last one? Wait a minute. Does that belong to samma samadhi? What does that belong to? I'm getting confused now. Are you getting confused now? What to do? So the point here is that the 3 insights, they are a result of practice in the path, right? And they're not really part of the path as such. here it is called the gradual training. You know, it's a kind of the same thing, but it is usually the path is the things that you have to do, and then the results of that path are the three kind of insights. And that's why I think it isn't there. However, sometimes what you find is you find the following. Yeah, where you have the tenfold. It's not called the tenfold path. It's called the tenfold factors, something like that. And so they add right knowledge and right liberation at the end. And that is equivalent there to the three kinds of insights. The 𝒕𝒉𝒂𝒔, I mentioned before, is the knowledge and liberation. Or maybe right insight and right insight is better, isn't it? Right insight and liberation? I don't know. Well, anyway, something like that. Knowledge sounds a bit like you go to university and you learn something, yeah, but it's not quite like that. So there you are, the parallel structure. And what is so interesting about the suttas is that when you start reading the suttas very broadly, you start to understand that this kind of structure is found absolutely everywhere. Yeah, you can recognize the Noble Eightfold Path in so many different suttas. And like the Sabbasava Sutta, the sutta on all the corruptions, all the defilements, it looks like a very different kind of sutta to these things, but yet if you look carefully, you will see the Noble Eightfold Path of the gradual training paralleling beautifully. And it's like that almost across the board. Any sutta which talks about the practice will look like the Noble Eightfold Path one way or another. The Ovada Patimokkha, yeah, Sabba Papassa Akaranang Kusalassa Upasampada Sachittang Pariyodapanang Etang Buddhana Sasanang, yeah, which is a beautiful verse you find in the Dhammapada, which is means not to do anything bad, but to do what is good, to purify the mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. Yeah, same thing. It's also the Noble Eightfold Path in very brief. And I was just doing the Mahamangala Sutta. Some of you came to my retreat, yeah? We did that when we were to Bintam Island this time. And the Mahamangala Sutta too has that structure. It begins really with right view, it goes through a large number of steps, and it ends up with the insights at the end, insights into the Four Noble Truths. And so this is kind of how the Buddha structures things. And it's very helpful to be aware of that, because when you read the suttas, you can then kind of compare and start to understand various factors more profoundly, because you see all of them through that prism, through that lens of the Noble Eightfold Path. So there you are. Make sense? Yeah? Okay, good. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, great. So that is the comparison of the two. And yeah. So now what we can do is we can move on to a little bit more detailed study of the various elements of the gradual training here. So before I do that, I'm going to check out what's in here. This is the leftover, this is the coffee from before, I think. Yes. Why? I know why. Because I fixed that up after I gave him the slides, I think. I think that's what happened. On my slides, actually, it's there, but not on these slides. You are right. Well spotted, by the way. That's very, very well done. Anyway, so seclusion, she mentioned that seclusion is missing from the slide. It should be before abandoning the hindrances, and it should be to go together with the right mindfulness there. It's actually not there. Yeah. All right, so let's now move on to the actual gradual training, the way it is explained in the suttas, yeah? So here we go. So this is how it starts. And it begins, this is from the Kandaraka Sutta. It is also found, as I mentioned before, in I think 11 or 12 or 13 or whatever it was, of the suttas in the Majjhima Nikāya, the middle length sayings. One of the very famous suttas where it's found is the Chula Hatti Padopama Sutta, the shorter sutta on the elephant's footprint, Majjhima Nikāya number 27. And that sutta is a sutta that Venerable Mahinda. Mahinda was the son of Ashoka. He took to Sri Lanka and he taught the Sri Lankans when he got there, the kings and the queens and the royalty. And that's how they became Buddhists in Sri Lanka, through that sutta. Yeah, so this is the shorter sutta on the simile of the elephant's footprint. A beautiful sutta. Talks about the footprint of the elephant, and the elephant is like the Buddha, yeah, the Naga, the kind of the powerful beast, and Naga, elephant is the powerful beast. In the same way, the Buddha, you can know the Buddha is present by knowing certain things. You know the footprint, and you know it's a big elephant. When you come to certain states in your meditation, you know the Buddha was here. Yeah, it's kind of powerful. The Buddha was here. You know the Buddha was there because these states are so beautiful and profound. There's something kind of remarkable about that, you know, and what those things are that you know are the jhana states. Yeah, when you come into the jhana states, you know this is a footprint of the Buddha when you go there. Sometimes to our peril, we misunderstand the importance of samadhi in Buddhism. It's incredibly important in Buddhism. Sometimes people think, samadhi is not so important because that's kind of what that's part of the Hindu tradition, and that's not what we do. But actually, these are very powerful and beautiful states. And just because they are part of the Hindu tradition doesn't mean that they are lesser or anything bad about them. They are the footsteps of the Buddha. And so it's very powerful and very important things. And this says something about this importance of these things. That's what you find in that particular sutta. I love that sutta. It's really, really beautiful and powerful. So why did I choose the Kandaraka sutta then? Don't know. Just random choice. Yeah, this is what happens. Okay. So a Buddha arises. So this is how it is always phrased. A Buddha arises in the world, perfected, fully awakened, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, holy, knower of the world, supreme guide for those who wish to train, a teacher of gods and humans, awakened and blessed. So this is the idea of a Buddha arising in the world. What does it mean, arises in the world? It's kind of strange, right? And what it means is that someone reaches awakening here. How do they reach awakening? They reach awakening because conditions are such that awakening happens. Yeah, and those conditions are not really the conditions that we usually hear about. Yeah, that someone makes a vow under the 𝑣𝑑𝑑𝑐𝒏𝒅𝒂𝒔 4 incalculable eons ago. That is not part of those conditions. The conditions rather are the conditions of that particular society. Yeah, it takes a certain kind of society for a Buddha to arise. There has to be a respect for samanas, people who practice that way. Ideally, there has to be already a practice of samadhi already, so you are very close to enlightenment, not quite there, but as close as you can get. Yeah, there has to be a person with a kind of right kind of qualities. If you look at our society, yeah, people have very different qualities. Some people are already really kind. Some are not so kind. Some already have good meditation. Like Ajahn Brahm, he was born with good meditation. Yeah, that's why it's called Brahma Vangso. Yeah, the lineage of Brahma. That's kind of the reason why. Yeah. And so we come into this world with different conditions, not because we have been bodhisattvas in the past, but just because that's the nature of things. People develop in different ways. And so a person comes in that society, and then awakening happens. That's what it means. A Buddha arises in the world. It happens every now and again because the conditions are right for it. Then when that happens, well, how is that person described? That person is called a Buddha later on. It's just any person. It can happen to anyone, right? To anyone here. A Buddha is just a person. What are the things that happen? How are they described? And you will notice here they are described in two ways. One, by their insight, yeah, fully awakened, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, knower of the world. This is all about insight. It's about how you understand things. Yeah. So this is one way that the Buddha is described. The other one is that it's described as the teacher, supreme guide, teacher of gods and humans. Yeah. So these are the two things that make the Buddha, the profundity of the insight and the compassion as a teacher. That's why we often talk about those two things as the two kind of main qualities of a Buddha, the compassion and the wisdom going together, teacher and insight being the similar kind of thing here. That is how a Buddha is described. Is that all? Just sounds pretty ordinary, doesn't it? Doesn't sound all that exciting, or maybe it isn't that ordinary. I think this is the problem. We think it is ordinary, but actually it is very profound. But you will notice that there are a lot of things that are missing there. What is missing is the idea of the bodhisattva who practiced for a long time. What is missing there are all the supernormal and kind of marvelous and amazing things. That is missing there. It is very down to earth. It is very grounding. And I think this to me is very important. We should keep the Dhamma as grounded. Whether all of these supernormal powers are possible or not is kind of irrelevant. That's not really the point. The point is that what we are dealing with is an insight into the nature of reality. That is what makes the Dhamma so powerful. If someone sees reality for us and tells us this is the way it is, we should be so grateful because it's so hard to often see what life actually is like. It's an amazing gift to humanity that someone is able to see this and then pass it on to others. It's an extraordinary thing, and we don't understand that that is what really matters. Everything else is kind of by the by. It is not important at all. This is the important thing. And then that person has enough compassion for the world to go out of their way, even though it is a negative thing for them, because it's not teaching people who don't want to listen. It's no fun. It's kind of all these stubborn disciples, who go off in the wrong direction or whatever. Poor Buddha, right? And yet, because compassion is so strong and because he understands that he can actually give something to humanity, he does that. But these are the two things we should remember the Buddha by. And this is what makes the Buddha so special. So let me go a little bit further. And so this is the other side of this kind of goes a little bit more into his insight, what it actually is. So he has realized with his own insight that this world, with its gods, maras and brahmas, this population with its ascetics and brahmins, gods and humans, and he makes it known to others. So this tells you something more about the insight of the Buddha, what exactly it is that he has seen. And what he has seen here is a little bit hard to kind of understand what this really is about, because this sounds kind of supernatural, but it isn't really. The point here is that he has understood the nature of samsaric existence. Samsara is the round of birth and deaths, and it includes all of these kind of births and deaths that you're seeing here. And so what this really is about is the various kinds of births and deaths, how you move around samsaric existence. It's about rebirth ultimately, and karma, because karma is what gives rise to these various kinds of existence that you can have. So it really comes back to karma and rebirth. And then you have this idea of this population with its ascetics and brahmins. Well, he has realized that, well, what does that mean? It sounds a bit strange. What do you mean you realize this population? Kind of, and I think what it means is that you understand all the various philosophies and spiritual practices that exists in the world. The various kinds of schools, the various kinds of cults, the various kinds of spiritual paths. He understands all of those and understand how they relate to his insight. Do they lead to that enlightenment? If not, do they lead anywhere near it? Do they lead in the wrong direction, a little bit in the right direction? So he understands all the philosophies in the world, their limitations and their strengths. I think this is what is meant by this particular phrase here. And so what this comes down to, and this was, we had a gentleman asking before about what is right view. There you are. This is exactly the main contents of the Buddha's right view. Karma and rebirth. And this is what I understand this to be. Karma and rebirth, and then what kind of philosophy talks about that in the right way, expresses that in the right way, the Four Noble Truths or what have you. Then you make it known to others. Yeah, and the way that the Buddha makes that known to the others is usually via the Four Noble Truths. That is how these things are made known. So a Buddha arises in the world. Yeah, right view becomes available, and then when right view becomes available, it gets spread out to the world. Yeah, because the Buddha makes this known to others. Yeah, this is what I have seen. Listen, this is important. This is about your existence. Do you want to be happy or do you want to suffer? If you want to be happy, this is what I've seen. Follow this path. This is what the Buddha says. And so it is, again, the highest kind of gift that any one human being can give to someone else. He gives us the highest happiness served on a plate. Yeah, right there, here, take it or leave it. That's what the Buddha does. So let me stop a little bit there. I don't want to go on for too long. The idea is to have kind of half an hour sessions and a little bit of Q&A and maybe tiny bit of meditation if you want to do that, just to chillax in between. So, yeah, does anyone like to ask any questions or comment about what we have talked about so far?
Good afternoon, Ajahn. If just now you're saying some people don't believe that it's rebirth, so that means this group of people they would never practice Buddha's teaching, right? Because since there's this component so important, if because I think Buddha said that if because we rebirth, that's why we suffer. That's why he come to teach us. If this group of people don't believe in rebirth, then there's no point for them to, I mean, refer to Buddha's teaching, right?
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. Because that's what the purpose of the Buddha teaching is, to overcome rebirth. It doesn't mean that all aspects of the Dhamma is useless to them. They can still be useless because even in the present life, it's good to be moral. Yeah, if you are kind and good-hearted in the present life, it means you have a better life in general. So it's still good to be moral. Meditation may still be very useful if you gain some states of bliss. Okay, states of bliss are still states of bliss, even though they, even though they may not lead to the end of rebirth, they still are positive in that sense. So aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path are still useful for them, but not to the same degree, not in the same profundity. Because even, if you just believe that this is life and after you die, then that's it, everything just comes to an end. There's not a big problem. Yeah, okay, I die. Okay, then it's all coming to an end. Okay, big, okay, good. But if you know that that actually it isn't like that, then actually you can be reborn in all kind of you know bad places, some good places, some bad places, depending on what happens. And the stakes are raised almost infinitely in comparison. And so it matters enormously to have right view. And understanding the implications of rebirth is one of the very important contemplations in the Dhamma. Really understand what that means. Yeah, and the more you understand what that means, the more kind of momentum you get in the spiritual practice. Because you get the motivation to do something because actually it is a bit concerning. Yeah, wow, this looks scary. Yeah, the way the Buddha describes it in the sutta sometimes is like, wow, like you have cried more tears than there is water in the four great oceans or whatever. Have you thought about, have you calculated how many tears that is? It's a lot of tears, right? It's kind of, I don't know how many there is. It's talking about trillions of tears probably. And that's kind of life for you. Yeah, it's a bit like that. And then after a while you think, okay, I better do something about this. Yeah, so actually this matters enormously, this kind of views. It changes your entire outlook, your entire approach to existence when you see things in this way. Yeah. Yes, Henry.
So there are Buddhists and there are Buddhists, right? So the view So you're saying to be your understanding of being a Buddhist, the belief or acceptance of karma and rebirth is fundamental. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would go so far as to say that if you outrightly reject any of those and say I don't believe in it, then you can't really be a Buddhist. You can say I don't know. I have my doubts, but I will I will look into it because the Buddha said so. Okay, you can say that. That's fine. But you can't reject it outright. If you reject it outright, you are rejecting the awakening of the Buddha. And if you're rejecting the awakening of the Buddha, well, then you have no faith, right? So if you have no faith in the Buddha, how can you be a Buddhist? Doesn't make any sense. You can call yourself a Buddhist, but even if you call yourself Buddhist, you're not a Buddhist. That's what I would. That's what I would argue. These days, people say, "Oh, yeah, I just identify as a Buddhist, so I call myself a Buddhist." But that's kind of silly. It's like me saying I identify as a Martian, but it doesn't make any sense, right? Why would I identify as a Martian? Yeah, it just doesn't, because it has to relate to something for it to be sensible identification. It has to kind of relate to some whatever, yeah. So yes.
Ajahn, before the Buddha, he had two teachers. One taught him jhana, and he got into the sphere of nothingness. The other one taught him jhana again, and he got into the sphere of neither perception and non-perception. Assuming these are two profound states, then why are the two teachers not enlightened?
Why not enlightened? Because they had wrong view. Yeah. And this is the thing. So when we talk about the noble, this is why there are different definitions of samadhi in the suttas. Right samadhi, right stillness. One of the definition is the four jhanas, but another definition is the one-pointedness of mind supported by the other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. And so in the Dhamma, 2 things are of fundamental importance for awakening. One is right view, the other one is the samadhi, the jhana. And without one of them, if you only have one of them, you're not going to make it. But only when the 2 come together, it's like you have the spark and the, what is it, the whatever, kind of. I think this is the meaning of samadhi in the sutras. It's actually the samadhi that you have. The samadhi is kind of right, but the view is wrong. That's why it's miccha samadhi. Yeah, so they had wrong view. They were probably Brahmanical teachers, so part of the Brahmanical religion. And the Brahmanical religion at that time had a very clear sense of self. Yeah, in fact, the purpose of life was to find that self, or to release that self, so it could unify with Brahman or something like that. So that kind of you recognize the unity of Brahman and the self. Yeah. So wrong. This is how important right view is. Yeah, really, really important. And I get into the deeper aspects of right view as well when we talk about this, not just rebirth and karma, but the deeper aspects of eternal, impermanence and these kind of things. That's also a very important part of right view. Yes. All right. Let's take one more question, and we can take a yeah.
Hi, Ajahn. Can I check, are there cases where people do not have jhanas and can be enlightened?
The cases where they don't have jhanas and they can be enlightened. Wow, now we're getting to the to the complicated things. I don't think it's possible to be. I think the question usually is phrased: is it possible to become a stream enterer and not have jhanas? Yeah, that's kind of usually how it's phrased. Usually, for enlightenment, is usually considered impossible without jhana. But stream entry is a little bit more unclear. Yeah, is it possible? You know the word stream entry? Yeah, it's like the first stages of the 4 stages of awakening, right? Number 1 is stream entry. And that is a little bit more unclear. However, I would say that the evidence from the suttas is that basically it is required. One of the most important kind of frameworks through which to understand the process of meditation is what is called a dependent liberation sequence. And according to dependent liberation, you have to have samadhi before you can have yata bhuta jnana dassana. Yata bhuta jnana dassana is seeing things according to reality. Stream entry is seeing things according to reality, right? It requires samadhi. So what does samadhi mean? That's the question there. Yeah, this is a very, very common thing in the suttas, found everywhere in the suttas. And so I think that relationship is kind of, there's no two ways about it, basically. So what does samadhi mean? Well, samadhi can have different meaning in the suttas. However, by far the most important one, yeah, like by a long, long way, is the jhanas. So it is almost saying you need to have jhana to be a stream entry. Yeah, not saying it kind of outright, but kind of implying in a very, very, almost implying it fully, without really saying it. So I would say that the answer to that question is that actually we shouldn't really ask that question here, because at the moment we ask it, we are kind of already kind of leaning the mind a little bit in the wrong direction. It is not about whether it's required, it's about whether it is part of the path. And it is part of the path. And so what you do is you practice the path. Yeah? And that includes the jhanas. And if you become a stream winner before you get to the jhanas, great. Yeah, well done. Yeah, we give you a little badge, stream winner. We can. But if you don't get to stream entry before the jhanas, well, then you don't stop. You don't not practice the jhanas because they're not required. You carry on with the path. So just practice the path, and things will happen. These things happen as a consequence of practicing the path. Don't leave out any factors on purpose. If you can't get the jhanas straight away because they are profound, fine, but still keep on going towards them, finding a way by which to practice these things, because then everything opens up, including stream entry and arahantship and everything else. So I think anyone who asks that question, is jhana necessary for stream entry? They should be, no, I was going to say they should be banned from the BF. No, but no one is banned from the BF. I'm just messing around. I just feel it is the wrong kind of question to ask. We shouldn't be asking that question. It doesn't really make any sense. Okay, Henry wants to ask one more question back there. So.
Yeah, actually, I find it a bit odd that the jhanas is mentioned, but not the other parts of the anapanasati, which means like ending with the vipassana.
Yeah.
Why in that way it was pull out the jhanas rather than say vipassana, for example, the last tetrad?
Yeah. So I think in the last tetrad of the Anapanasati Sutta is the Anicca-nupassi, Viraga-nupassi, Nirodha-nupassi, Patinissagga-nupassi. It's all about contemplating impermanence, fading away, cessation, and letting go. Yeah, this is kind of the last tetrad. And that I think the point of those four is that you use those four, you can use them after not only after jhanas, but any point you practice anapanasati, you gain a certain depth of meditation, and then you contemplate that in terms of those four. So you don't have to go all the way to step 12 to do step 13, 14, 15. Yeah, you can use the last tetrad on however deep you go in your anapanasati meditation. So it is an aid to be used along the path, yeah, because what you want to do is you want to build up insight and peace together. Yeah, so it's not just about being calm, because calm should always also come with vipassana and samatha coming together. So the deeper you go in your meditation, the more insight you have, and that insight comes through the last tetrad you're talking about now. Most powerfully, it comes after jhana. That's when it's most powerful. But after jhana, it's almost automatic. And I think that is why it is not mentioned here. Once you come to the jhana stages, that will be almost like your automatic. You will see, because it's just staring you in the face. So obviously that certain things are impermanent and gone. Yeah. Okay, let's have a short, just a little bit of meditation and also a break. So if anyone wants to stretch their legs or toilet break or whatever, this is a good time to do it. And I'll just ring the bell when we carry on. By the way, these are just meant to be short meditation, just 5 or 10 minutes, just to stabilize the mind a little bit and kind of get back into the right kind of groove. Okay, so that is the rising of the Buddha, and then he makes his insight known to others. And then how does he do that? That's the next part here. He does the following. This is the Buddha teaching the Dhamma. He teaches the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. It is meaningful, it is well phrased, and he reveals a spiritual practice that is entirely full and pure. So the idea here is that once you have seen the truth, the reality of things, what actually is going on, then you teach a Dhamma that accords with that truth, then that Dhamma will give good results. Yeah, you're teaching a path of practice, and that path of practice is part of the insight, as I mentioned before. You have insight into how the practice unfolds and how it leads to the same insight that the Buddha had, the awakening experience. And because it is based on that reality, based on how things actually are, it gives good results. Because when you act according to the way things are, it has good results. Yeah, it's good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. Positive qualities arising, feeling better about yourself, feeling more happy, suffering going down, good things going up, more metta, more compassion, more equanimity, more patience, more contentment, more of all the good things that you ever wanted in your life are there. Good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end, because it is based on right view. Meaningful, sa atang. Yeah, this is can be understood. The atta here can be understood as purpose, but also as meaning. So it has a meaning, but also a purpose, clear purpose. Meaningful and well phrased. Vyanjanang. Vyanjanang here is the phrasing. So the phrasing is good, and the purpose, the goal is good, where it is leading to. So it's meaningful and well phrased. And again, it's well phrased. Why? Because it is based on right view. It is well phrased because the Buddha does this out of compassion. So he ensures that he teaches in the way that really is easy to understand. When you set out a teaching at the very beginning, when you are the first person, you should be really, really careful with how you phrase things. Yeah, because you're setting down the example for future generations. You're teaching not only the people in front of you, but you're teaching also future generations. The Buddha talks in the 𝐵𝒅𝒂𝒂𝒔 Sutta, the Noble Search. He says that I'm going to set in motion the wheel of the Dhamma in Varanasi. And so he knows that he's starting something that will carry on through the ages, through various cultures, through from one generation to the next one. And so he phrases it in a way that is universal, that is possible to understand across cultures. One of the things that you recognize about the Dhamma of the Buddha, it is not very culturally specific. There's not that many references to Indian culture. Yeah? You don't feel that you are immersed in ancient Indian culture. However, if you read something like the Upanishads, it's much more culturally bound, much more metaphor, much more allusions to weird things like the horse sacrifice and these kind of things. And you cannot really understand those things unless you are an Indian who is part of that culture. But these here are universal things that we can all understand, right view, right intention, etc., kind of obvious what it means. And so the Buddhist teaching is unique, I think, in the terms of world spirituality, almost unique, in that it is a universal teaching. It applies to everyone, everywhere, and it's not just something specific to a particular place and time. And then he reveals a spiritual path that is entirely full and pure. Yeah, there is nothing missing, it's entirely complete. It is 𝐾𝑒vala paripurnang. Paripurna means complete and full. 𝐾𝑒vala parisuddhang. Parisuddha is pure. There's nothing missing on the Buddhist path. Yeah? He knows the path. He has seen the path. Part of the awakening experience is entirely pure in the sense that there's no part of it that is kind of slightly dodgy. It's all kind of pure. It's all beautiful, all leading to the same place, and all of it contributes to the practice of purifying the person. Yeah, so this is kind of what the Buddha gives you, a complete path. No need to study Abhidhamma. Yay! Isn't that great? Yeah, because it's really boring, right? So it's kind of, it's good that we don't have to study it. And this is what I think anyway. I find it really kind of not so interesting. Yeah, there it is. So that is the Dhamma that kind of gets expressed in the world, that kind of comes from the Buddha. And then once that Dhamma is made available to the world, there will be people who hear it. Yeah, one of the kind of things that you find in the suttas, which I find really inspiring about India. I don't know, I really love India as a country. I think I love every country, but I love, really love going to India. And when you read kind of the ancient suttas and the way people were, it's a very spiritual country, India. Some of that spirituality is wrong-founded, and it kind of, a lot of people getting trapped by dodgy gurus and things like that. But there's also, because spirituality is so pervasive, that's also where you find the people who really are enlightened. You find those people in India as well. And so when the Buddha was traveling around in the early days, he would be traveling around the Ganges, kind of the Ganges plain, yeah? And he would go from village to village and town to town. And then he would kind of camp, or he would kind of settle down outside the village or outside the town somewhere. And then the word would spread in the town. Yeah, oh, there's an arahant. Yeah, they say he's an arahant. He's arrived in our village. We should all go and see him. And then everyone goes out and they go to see and visit the arahant, because the rumor is that arahant has arrived. Yeah, isn't that kind of great? People are really interested in spiritual truths. They want to know if there's someone who has an insight into reality. They want to know about that. There's something very attractive to me about that kind of society, where everyone is interested in the deep questions of the meaning of life, what life really is about, how we should live to the best of our ability, how we can make the world a better place and all of these kind of things. Actually, not so much about how to make the world a better place, actually, but it's how we can at least personally contribute to a better world by living in a good way. And there's something very really remarkable about that, and which I find, is almost unique to kind of Indian society. Singapore is a little bit like that. Ajahn Brahm comes to town, yeah, and some people say, yeah, Ajahn Brahm is in town, yeah, we should go and see him, yeah. Whereas other people say, yeah, forget about Ajahn Brahm, yeah, that's not so, but because you still have quite a strong Buddhist tradition in Singapore, but in places like Australia, Ajahn Brahm is in town. Yeah, whatever. It's but there are some people who are interested. But in India, it was more so than in other places. And so, because of that, then when the Buddha goes around teaching, then what happens is that a householder hears that teaching, or the householder's offspring, or someone reborn in some clan. They gain faith in the Buddha. Yeah, so when you hear that Dhamma, yeah, the householder or the householder's child, this doesn't mean a small child, this means someone who is the next generation, that's really all it means. Or someone reborn in some clan, in other words, anyone else, anyone at all, they hear that teaching, they gain faith in the Buddha. Yeah, this is kind of the starting point. You hear that pure teaching of the Buddha, you hear about this insight that he had, and then you recognize there's something there. And this is kind of one of the magical things about the Dhamma. You recognize the truth of it, even though it is very profound, even though it is very difficult to understand fully, like dependent origination or, the extinguishment or whatever. Still, you know that there's something there that is very, very beautiful and very special. And so you start to gain that faith. You start listening to the Buddha. Now, that faith in Buddhism is, like I said before, it is a mixture of faith and confidence. The Pali word is saddha, and it can be translated in different ways. And some people prefer the word confidence, other people use the word faith. Confidence is more like you hear it and it makes sense to you. Yeah, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of confidence. Faith is more like you don't really know why you have faith, but you just have faith. Yeah, you kind of your mind just goes there, and you agree with it. Yeah, for some whatever random reason. And both of them are, both of these words are important in, both of these angles of thinking about saddha are important, because confidence means that you're actually investigating whether what the Buddha says, it makes sense, yeah? And that and things should make sense. It's not about blind faith or believing in things despite the evidence. There's nothing like that in Buddhism. Everything should make sense. On the other hand, it should also be emotionally uplifting. There should be an emotional aspect to this that is positive. You should feel joy, yeah, if you have confidence in something very beautiful. Here is someone who shows you the highest truth. Well, you should be happy that someone has found the highest truth and now they're sharing it with you. Isn't that wonderful? Wow, the highest truth. Gee, wow, that's really cool. And you close your eyes and you meditate and you feel joyful. Yeah, that's kind of the idea there. So for that reason, faith is not a wrong translation, but I think it is slightly incomplete. And so this is what happens. And this is then the starting point of that path. And then what happens is the following. They reflect, yeah? So gradually you reflect. This does not mean you reflect this straight away, but maybe after thinking for a while. Living in a house is cramped and dirty, but the life of one gone forth is wide open. It is not easy for someone living at home to lead the spiritual life utterly full and pure, like a polished shell. Why don't I shave off my hair and beard, dress in ochre robes, and go forth from lay life to homelessness? So, yeah, living in a house is cramped. Cramped here is the idea that it is confined, yeah, because you're living close to lots of other people. And this is one of the points why seclusion is often said to be important, because those cramped living conditions makes it hard to get enough mental space to really be able to practice the Dhamma properly. Yeah, because the physical conditions are cramped, your mind also becomes kind of cramped and constrained by the things around you. Dirty, the Pali word is rajapato, which means the path of dust, quite literally. And that just means that Raja is another word for Raja is another word for kind of defilements in the Dhamma. Yeah, so these are defilements are very easy. They arise very easily when you live in close proximity with other people. Yeah, because of attachments, because of the way we kind of deal with each other. It's very hard to kind of have that purity. It's very hard to have a mind like a polished shell. Isn't that nice? Polished shell. So life of one gone forth is wide open. Yeah, and so because it is wide open, then if you want to practice that spiritual life utterly full and pure like a polished shell, they decide it's better to go forth. So in reality, of course, there is a large number of variations of how to live your life. Yeah, you can live in a house that is very cramped and full of people. I think in ancient India, households were really large. You have all the generations living together. Yeah, I don't know how many generations, 3 or 4. Then you had all the servants and you had all the workers and you had everyone kind of in one enormous household. And so it would have been very cramped. Yeah. And if you were a poor person and everyone would live in one room or 2 rooms, there wouldn't even be much division. And so you can see why it would be hard to live that spiritual life. In the modern world, it is not quite as difficult because often we have our own rooms. Yeah, often sometimes you may not have any children. You just you and your spouse, or maybe you live completely by yourself. Maybe you're just a single person. And then, of course, your life is getting closer to the idea of being a monastic. You can be like a little monastic at home, right? Living by yourself. That's kind of nice. Yeah, I know people who live like this. I know some really impressive lay people. They are so impressive that it's like sometimes puts the monastics to shame. That's how impressive they are, some of these lay people. And they live by themselves, they live far away, they meditate, get in amazingly deep states of meditation, and it's just astonishing what they do. And I think, wow. And so they are, in many ways, like monastics. So it's not, this is like a spectrum, yeah? So Henry, you will be concerned about this one. It's a spectrum here, right? And so you find yourself moving towards a spectrum of monasticism in a sense as you live in the right way. So this is kind of the idea here. And so then they decide based on that they want to shave off their hair and beard. Yeah, the Buddha also shaved off his hair and beard when he became a monk. And so that was kind of the done thing in those days. It wasn't just the Buddhists, it was the done thing across the border. And then you dress in your ochre robes, kind of, yeah, various kind of brownish, yellowish colors, and then you go forth. Or then you think, maybe I should go forth from lay life to homelessness. And so the idea comes to you that maybe I should go forth. And then what happens? After some time, after some time is kind of an important point here. It takes time for these ideas to mature. It takes time for these ideas to become solid and become clear. It takes time for you to be allowed by your parents. Is that true? It's true here in Singapore as well, right? It takes a while to get to be allowed by your parents to go forth, depending on the wisdom of your family. But sometimes it can be hard. And then, so after some time, when that intention matures in you in the right kind of way, then you give up a large or a small fortune, or a large and small family circle. And then you do actually shave off your hair and beard. You do dress in ochre robes, and you go forth from the lay life to homelessness. And so that is your right intention. So all of the things we see here are really part of that right intention maturing in various ways. From the right view arises the right intention. Now you want to give your life to the spiritual path. You want to give your life because you understand that this is what life is all about. Everything else is not really very meaningful. This is what life is about. This is the purpose of existence. And that's what you kind of get at this particular point. So then you go forth. Of course, there are sometimes the complications in going forth. Sometimes your parents won't let go of you. They say, no, you can't go forth. Stay, we need you. We need to look after us. The Buddha had that problem when he tried to go forth. His parents were crying and saying he didn't want him to go forth. And so this is like an eternal problem. It's always been there. I remember when I went forth, my parents felt bad. It was difficult for them. Really hard. And I think now, that after 30 years, they're kind of okay. But it is hard, right? This is your child. This is someone who's very close to you. And they leave, and they go. It's hard. If you have the right kind of view, you will still encourage them to do it because it's a beautiful thing to do. But it is hard. And you just have to remember that you don't lose your child just because they decide to go forth. You win something far better, far more important if you do that. So... Anyway, these things are complex. So, so this is then what happens. And if you don't do this, then you stay as a lay person and practice in lay life instead. Okay, so then when you have gone forth, what happens next? You have a right intention. What happens next is that once you have gone forth, you take up the training and livelihood of the mendicants. These are the monks and the nuns. And so you take up that training, which means you practice all the precepts and you practice the livelihood. It's like you have a bowl and robe, and you practice, you use the bowl and robe to make a living. You don't make a living in any other dodgy kind of way. You don't kind of act as a doctor for lay people. You don't kind of do fortune telling for lay people and these kind of things. You don't do feng shui. Feng shui, that's actually one of the things they did in time of the Buddha as well. They did feng shui sometimes, considered wrong livelihood. Instead, you just do what you're supposed to do as a monastic. Then what do you do? Well, then comes the various ways of right conduct I would mention before. So now comes the gradual training. Now is really the training kind of sets in. So far, you just kind of followed naturally, just gone along with your with that right view. And now you have to start the training. And it begins with giving up the killing of living creatures, renouncing the rod and the sword. You are scrupulous and kind, living full of compassion for all living beings. I don't know about you, but to me this is a very beautiful expression of the idea of being kind to living beings. Very often we talk about the first precept, panatipata veramani, abstaining from the killing of living beings. But when you see it from the point of view of the gradual training, it is far more involved than that. If you look at that little paragraph there, how beautifully it is phrased. You stop killing. You renounce the rod and the sword. Rod is like punishment, danda. The stick. Stick is another word for it. But then, not only that, not only don't you do the bad things, but you are deliberately scrupulous and kind, full of compassion for living beings. And so this is something, says something about the profundity of the training that we're trying to undergo. It is not just practicing, kind of stopping doing certain things. It's about having an attitude that is the exact opposite of those negative things. Being kind and scrupulous and compassionate. That is what it really is about. And so this is why this training is so profound, why it is so deep. This is why when people say, well, why is my meditation not going better? Well, it is because you haven't practiced this sila fully. This is the real sila, and the sila is far, far more than the practice of the 5 precepts or whatever. It goes much, much deeper than that. And unless you have a mind that is developed in this particular way, then you will be very limited. Your meditation will also be limited by that. So if you don't know why your meditation isn't going deeper, you can probably find the answer right there. Not enough compassion, not enough metta. This is kind of where things usually are missing here. So this is the real gradual training, the full practice of these things. In a kind of sense. And then we have the same. We come to they give up stealing. They take only what is given. They expect only what is given. They keep themselves clean by not stealing. So because now you are a monastic, you take only what is given. You expect only what is given. My understanding of this is that you only desire what is given. You desire only what is given. You don't have any desires even beyond that. So already here we're seeing a degree of mental purity as well. You don't covet. Covetousness is the idea of wanting the belongings of others, right? You don't have any desires of others, and so you don't have any desires for that. And so that's the only desire you have. You accept what is given. You go into the village, you have your alms bowl with you, except when you come to Singapore, you go down to the table downstairs instead, but that's that's kind of very, very nice. And then that's all you do. You eat what is given. There's something very nice about that. You don't have any expectations about what people are going to give, or, am I going to get that nice chili paste from Henry or whatever? Is he going to bring that or whatever? You don't have any expectations like that, because you just go into the village, you go in town, whatever people give you is what you eat. And it's very nice not to have any expectations. You get what you get, and that is what you eat, and then you enjoy that. And that's kind of the end of the story. It means you don't proliferate about things. One of the dangers of living in a monastery like we do in Perth is that we know the Kandarakas put the same sauces out every day, right? And if that sauce isn't there, then that's kind of bad. That's not the way it should be. If the sauce isn't there, the sauce isn't there, right? Okay, that means you don't have that sauce that day, But it's kind of hard to avoid that if you are used to things being in a certain way here. And so this is the idea here. You expect only what is given. So what is the opposite of not stealing? Well, the opposite of not stealing is obviously generosity, right? In the previous one, we saw the opposite of killing is like being compassionate and kind. Here, the opposite is generosity. Generosity is not mentioned. It is not mentioned because it is number one, it is not so much part of the monastic path, yeah, because you're not generous usually in the way of material things. You can be, but not quite in the same way as as a layperson would be. But also because generosity is spoken about elsewhere to great length, and because it's spoken about elsewhere in great length, it's kind of it's seen as almost a separate aspect of the path. And when on Friday, we're going to look at the gradual instruction, there we find generosity. And this is precisely because this is a teaching usually given to lay people. And there we find it right there in the middle of it. So it's going to see the slight differences here between the way the Buddha would teach lay people and the way he would teach monastics, because of just the way we live our lives. So yeah, you keep yourself clean. Yeah, pure is the Pali word, suchi, by not stealing. There is a certain degree of impurity that arises if you steal, and that is what you avoid if you don't steal, which is kind of an interesting little thing, which is right there. So yeah, okay. Last one of right conduct. They give up unchastity. They are celibate, set apart, avoiding the common practice of sex. So again, this is the monastic path. And so you live a life of sexual abstinence is the idea. And the opposite of sexuality is meditation. Yeah, because sexuality is one of the things that drives you out into the world. It's a very important part. It's kind of a thing, it's kind of the five senses practiced. This kind of epitomizes the five senses, if you like. And to withdraw from the five senses is therefore also epitomized by giving up sexuality. That then allows the meditation to happen. So it is giving that up is the opposite. That's why you practice 8 precepts on meditation retreats, because now your focus is on meditation practice instead. That's the opposite there, the clarity of the mind and the mind that is free of defilements that comes from that. So that is the practice of virtue by body, yeah, in the gradual training. So okay, let's do a little bit more. Now we come to the practice of virtue by speech. Yeah, so you give up lying. You speak the truth and stick to the truth. You are honest and trustworthy. You don't trick the world with your words. Yeah, so it's not just about not lying, it's about being honest and trustworthy. People feel that what you say is basically what you say, and it's not kind of half-truth or anything like that. It is the full truth. And you're not trying to be tricky. You're not like a lawyer who's trying to kind of get away with speech, not lying, not quite lying, but kind of bordering on lying. Did I lie? No, I didn't lie. Okay, I got it. I'm all right. But still, you're kind of, being a bit tricky there with your words. And so the idea is to be as honest and straightforward as possible. People feel they can trust you. What you say is the truth. So again, there's many degrees here of giving up lying, as you can see here, and many degrees of sticking to the truth. And then you give up divisive speech. You don't repeat in one place what you have heard in another, so as to divide people against each other. Instead, you reconcile those who are divided, supporting unity, delighting in harmony, loving harmony, speaking words that promote harmony. Yeah, I don't know. It's all of these things are very beautifully phrased, and this idea of making harmony in the world. Yeah, it is especially important in the world as we have it today. There's so much division in the world. There's so many wars going on. People kind of hating each other, and it's kind of crazy. And if we as Buddhists can be a force for good and for harmony in the world, then I think we are doing something very positive. And so it's great that we can work together. I think it's just wonderful that we can have, we can work across national boundaries, the BSWA and Buddhist Fellowship and all large number of Buddhist groups kind of coming together around the world. I was recently in Sri Lanka. After Singapore, I'm going to Europe, teaching another retreat over there. And so kind of it's almost like the whole world coming together. And it's very, very delightful. And then you have the Sangha is very broad as well. You know, the Sangha in Perth is a very kind of Sangha with people from everywhere around the world. Yeah, a couple of monks we have are from India even. We have Indian monks. Yeah, that's kind of really, I really like the idea of having Indian monks because, you know, that's where it all started out. And I was kind of growing again. And I do actually know a few Indian monks. I have one young man that I communicate with. He's only 16 years old. He's from Bangalore in India, and he's really keen on becoming a monk. He's a really smart little kid. He's only 16, and he wants to become a monk. And he's writing to me and saying, "Oh, what should I do with this? What should I do with that? How can I become a monk as quickly as possible?" And it's kind of really, I really like that actually. It's really nice, really positive. So let's work together. Let's follow what the Buddha says here, giving up divisive. Let's work in harmony. And it's such a beautiful thing when we can do that. We can put away our own views and instead go with what other people say. That's a beautiful way how it is expressed in the Upakkilesa Sutta. They give up harsh speech. Speech is mellow, pleasing to the ear, lovely, going to the heart, polite, likable, and agreeable to the majority of people. The is it Putunana? Anyway, whatever. So agreeable to the many people, to the ordinary person. Yeah, gentle speech. It's too much harsh speech in the world. Not enough people who speak in a gentle way. So you feel like you just want to hear more of what they say because they speak in a nice way. Like Venerable Ananda was famous at the time of the Buddha. The Buddha said when Venerable Ananda stopped speaking, people want him to speak more. Please speak more. Yeah, the monks, the nuns, the laymen, and the laywomen, everyone wanted him to speak more because they felt so happy in his presence when he taught the Dhamma. So gentle, mellow, pleasing to the ear. And then the last one. They give up talking trivial talk. I don't agree with nonsense. Nonsense. Yeah, trivial talk or something like that. Their words are timely, true, and meaningful, in line with the teaching and the training. They say things at the right time that are valuable, reasonable, succinct, and beneficial. Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Timely, you speak at the time when it is useful, not at any time, not when you want to talk, but when it's good for others as well. It is meaningful, it has a purpose, it's in line with the teaching and the training. Yeah, it is Dhamma and Vinaya. And it is valuable. You store it up. You put it into your heart. You bring it out on a rainy day when you need to be inspired by some valuable talk. Nidanavatting, treasurable talk. It is reasonable. It is succinct. You don't go on forever. And it is beneficial for the people who hear. So those are the 4 kinds of. I can never read these things too much. Every time I read them, I get inspired. It's just so beautiful, isn't it true? And you have no idea how many times I've read these passages, but it's true. And so, yeah. Anyway, so would you like? Is the chance again to make some comments or ask questions or say your bit if you want to say your bit or whatever. So please go for it. You have to. I think you've gone quiet because you have to practice right speech, right? It's gonna be hard. I don't know. There's many more factors for right speech as well. The suttas are full of the idea of right speech. Yeah, so there's kind of many different ways in which this comes in. So yeah. Anyway. Everyone is so happy? Wow, so happy. That's good. Okay, let's do a little bit of meditation first, and then maybe some questions will arise in the mind during the meditation. It's supposed to be peaceful, but you know what it's like. Yeah, so, okay. Okay, so only short meditations. Any questions arose in your mind when you were? Yes, one person here had a question arising. Okay, good.
Hi, Ajahn. Okay, because Singapore is an aging population, as you know, and we expect to have more dementia patient coming up. So I just wonder, can meditation helps to protect our brains from shrinking or prevent the cell from dying? And just because we also come across musicians, because they saying because we don't use our brain too much, but we also come across musician also turn demented, politician also turn dementia when they age. So have you ever come across a monk or nun when they age, they also demented?
Absolutely. I know many monks and nuns who get dementia as well. This is, I think you can reduce the severity and you can reduce, sometimes you can even maybe eliminate it, but only sometimes. Sometimes the cause and conditions are so strong that they get it regardless. And so it's not something you can eliminate completely, but you can alleviate some of the symptoms and you can make it less likely and make it less severe by meditation or by a wise lifestyle, eating the right thing and all these kind of things. And so, but it's not impossible to eliminate completely. And if you have an aging population, that's kind of what's going to happen. It's just par for the course, as they say. What can you do? Yeah. So, unfortunately, but sometimes dementia can seem like a terrible thing because you lose the connection with all the people who are closest around you. But some people get demented in a nice way. They are still happy afterwards, and they still have a positive attitude. And also, you have dementia. The moment you die, you are released from that sick brain, and so you're okay again. So it's only a temporary, like a temporary illness, like most illnesses. And so it's not as terrible as, I mean, from a Buddhist point of view, it's not as terrible as it is from maybe some other people's point of view. So yeah, sometimes we have to be careful not to kind of buy into all the views of the rest of society, because as Buddhists we often see things a bit differently, and so sometimes we just need to stand back a little bit and reflect on things in a slightly different way. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Over here. Yeah.
Ajahn, I just want to get your opinion. The last part said, give up talking nonsense.
Yeah.
I find it's impossible to give up talking nonsense. I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
My reason is because in the course of our daily life, we talk to many, many different type of people.
Yeah.
And somehow, you get drawn into it.
Yeah.
Other than, you say everybody you talk to, you just say yes or no.
Yeah.
That's the only way to avoid talking nonsense. But that's impossible to do.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
No, first of all, thank you for your honesty. I like that. I say yes. I understand what you're saying, and I think that is unfortunately a problem as a monastic. Even as monastic, sometimes you kind of end up talking nonsense. But yes, and so you try. You don't want to be completely antisocial and a very difficult person, and so you try to find a middle way that works for you. One of the things to remember is that I think also this here is a gradation of the different kinds of right speech or wrong speech, and this is the very last point. So it is the least bad. If you end up talking a bit about politics or whatever, okay, let it be. Let's talk a bit about politics or wars in Ukraine or whatever. If it has to be talked about, then it has to be talked about a little bit at least. But don't, try. This is one of the great things about having friends who are on the same path as you are, mostly, Kalyana Mittas, is that hopefully they also tend to talk more like the way you would like to talk and less kind of in worldly ways. If people are not Buddhist at all, they might talk about going to the pub and drinking beer, and something like that, which you may not find if you have friends in the Buddhist Fellowship, for example. And so this is one of the reasons why spiritual friendship is so important, because it helps us to avoid these kind of tricky situations where you feel obliged to, say things or do things that you maybe rather wouldn't if you had the full opportunity to avoid it. So be reasonable. Yeah, don't be. Otherwise, Buddhists we can become a pain in the backside if we become too kind of too strict and too unreasonable. So find the middle way here. Yeah. Yeah, of course they do. Of course they do, because we are all at different degrees of commitment on the Buddhist path, right? As depending on the degree of commitment you have, it will vary enormously. And the majority of Buddhists in the world are not all that committed. Even finding people who keep the 5 precepts is not that common. Yeah, it's not that many who do that. So it's not all that surprising. So yeah, at the end of the day, you have to have compassion for everyone. That's the only way forward. Yeah. Okay, Henry, over here. Yeah.
Okay, lay people have lay problems, and monastic have monastic problems, right? Even the community of monastics. Yeah. So it seems to me, this question of gradual path, seclusion become very important. Yeah. So how does monastic handle this seclusion? Because in the community of monastics, you don't get seclusion as well. So you mentioned about lay people going into maybe the bush or in the forest, right, on their own. Would that be the answer to this? Because you have nobody to talk to, no nonsense to talk about, no news to hear. Do you think this is like wrong view, or is something seriously should be considered?
No, I think that's something you should consider. Sometimes. But even if you just go on a 8 precept retreat where there's noble silence, that's already quite a lot of seclusion because you're not talking to anyone. And seclusion comes from that lack of interaction. So not talking is already a very good starting point. So coming to Jhana Grove, and I just finished a 9-day retreat there just came from just a few days ago, and it was a beautiful retreat. And I had a very good feeling. There was a really good atmosphere there, and very, very few people. There was no talking going on or anything like that. So it was remarkable, and some people had some really nice meditations as well. So it was great. So absolutely try sometimes to find a bit of seclusion for yourself. Monasteries vary enormously in how much seclusion they provide, but our monastery in Perth provides a lot of seclusion actually for the monastics, because we live in little cuties in the forest, and 23 hours of the day I don't see anyone except for kangaroos and mosquitoes or whatever. And so actually it provides a lot of seclusion. I can also go on retreat whenever I want to seclude myself fully, I can do that. So we have our monastery actually is almost made for seclusion, if you have that kind of commitment. Yeah. So come and stay with us, Henry, for a few days in the monastery. Yeah. Where's your wife? Is she over there? Okay. Is that okay? Can you go for it? Okay. Sorry, I'm being naughty. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone? Yeah, please.
Ajahn Brahm, thanks for sharing your insights. Pardon me for my ignorance, but would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on the rebirth part of it from Buddhist perspective? How it happened? Is it just change of physical body, or how?
So rebirth is when you die, then you are released from your physical body, the one you have now, and then you have a different body. You have like a finer body. So you can read some of those near-death experiences. People come out of the body, but they still have a body. It's just it's a lighter kind of body. And then there is like an intermediate stage, and then after a while, then you actually get reborn properly after that. And a large number of different rebirths are possible. You can be reborn as a human being in various ways. You can be reborn as a ghost. Yeah. You can be reborn as an animal, or you can be reborn as a deva, like a higher being, like what they call here the gods, for example. Yeah, so all of these things are possible. And when you get reborn into those places, it's not at all mysterious. It's like, oh, now I'm here. Now I'm a kangaroo. Oh, that was a bad idea. Or you get reborn as a god. Oh, now I'm a god. Wow, this is pretty nice. Yeah, now I can enjoy myself and have a good time or whatever. And so it sounds strange to be reborn as these things, but actually it's just now you happen to be there. Yeah, that's kind of all it is, really. Now you are in that particular state. So that's kind of the the idea of rebirth, and it's very uncertain where you get reborn. If you live your life really, really well and you keep a very high standard of virtue, chances are you will get reborn in the heavenly realm. Yeah, so you get reborn in among the gods or whatever, and then you stay there for a while, and then you die in that realm. Yeah, none of these things are permanent, and then you die from there, and then it's again very uncertain where you get reborn after that. And in the long run, if you look over the very, very long time spans, you will sometimes get reborn in a high realm, sometimes in a low realm, sometimes as a human being, and it will kind of yo-yo around like this a little bit, yeah? And that's kind of the problem. The problem is that over the long run, because there are impersonal cause and conditions that cause you to do good and bad things, and then cause you to be reborn in good or bad states. At the end of the day, you are not in charge. That's kind of the Buddhist idea of non-self. You are not really in charge. It happens according to cause and conditions. And so that is what is so problematic about that. Was anything else you wanted me to talk about regarding rebirth? Or was there anything specific you had in mind?
Yeah, I'm just wondering then, what's the purpose of having gone through so many lives and...
There is no purpose. This is the problem. There is absolutely no purpose. Yeah, this is why it is so despairing. Because you get reborn. Whether it has a purpose or not is not the point. The point is that you get reborn. Yeah, so it just happens to you. And after a while, you realize actually it's all dukkha. You're just roaming around without purpose, without goal, without aim, suffering here, suffering there. Time to make an end of it. That's what the Buddhist path is about making an end of rebirth, because actually it is pointless, quite rightly. Does that sound very bleak?
And it's about like if someone committed suicide, then what happened to that?
What happens when someone commits suicide? It depends on the kind of karma they have. Yeah, so sometimes we talk about suicide as if it's always bad, and it depends on the karma. It depends on, sometimes you find yourself in a very desperate state with lots of suffering, and life is really, really tough, and you can't bear it anymore, so you commit suicide. It is not an evil act in its own right. It depends on the accumulated karma that you have. So you can commit suicide, and you not necessarily born in a bad state because of that. So it depends on why you commit suicide. Depends on the karma you have built up. Depends on all of these factors. Yeah. You are very welcome. Yeah. Richard.
Yes, Ajahn.
Not Patrick, Richard. I make this mistake
very
every
right.
time. Yeah, now it's coming back to me. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
Thanks, Ajahn. May I ask you a question that while we currently have a physically alert mind and body, right, at this stage.
Yeah.
So what and how should we practice so that we achieve a better mindfulness at the moment of death?
At the moment of death.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what should we do?
Okay. So usually when you die, mindfulness tends to become quite strong, yeah, because you have to give up everything, and because you are giving things up, because you are abandoning things. That abandoning means fewer desires. Yeah, fewer desires means more mindfulness, basically. And so one of the most important things we can do is actually to do meditation practice, because meditation is very similar to dying. The process is the same, because whether it's a meditation or dying, you have to let go of things. Yeah, either way you have to let go of things. The meditation doesn't work unless you let go. Dying, you are faced with the fact that everything has to go, and so you better be able to let go, otherwise you're going to suffer a lot. As the two things go together. And for that reason, one of the things you can do is you can use the mindfulness of death to improve your meditation. And then that meditation will in turn improve your ability to let go when you actually die. Yeah, so the two things are two sides of the same coin. You use them together. Death contemplation now helps meditation. Meditation now helps at the time when you eventually have to die, because you are ready for that. So do the death meditation, but just do meditation in general. And the deeper, the more you can let go, the more ready you will be at the time of death. But the reality is that all the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path really come together. Yeah, and when all of them come together, they become like a very, powerful source of stability and something to lean on, something to take refuge in when eventually you have to pass away. Yeah. Is that helpful? Yeah, great. Yeah.
Hi, Ajahn. On the questions of right view,
Yeah.
will it be difficult for a person who's depressive or have a lot of negative thoughts to gain that? And what can they do to be better towards the right view?
So you're saying right view is hard for a person who's depressed?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Yeah, I don't think there is any contradiction between depression and right view. I think you can still have right view. In fact, I think right view can often be helpful for depressed people. Yeah, because very often the reason why we are depressed is because we feel bad about ourselves. We haven't achieved enough in life, or we are not as good as we thought we should be, and all of these kind of things. But when you understand that you are a victim of cause and conditions, it's not really up to you whether you are successful or not. That depends on cause and conditions in your life. Then you are free of that guilt or free of that burden of having to be somebody. Yeah. And actually, why am I being so down on myself? I haven't been successful in school, or I haven't been successful. But actually, that's just cause and conditions why I haven't been successful. I don't bear any responsibility for that. And so it can actually be very helpful. And so using right view and reflecting on it and again, I think can often help people out of depression. And then there's the other side, and that is that the spiritual path gives you rise to hope, because the spiritual path is what determines your future. And so if you are depressed because the world is looking like it's in a dicey state, which it does sometimes, well, actually your future is not determined by what happens in the world. Your future is determined by what happens in your heart. Are you a good person? And that is such a beautiful thing. Yeah, it means that you can watch the news and say, got nothing to do with me. Yeah, I'm going in a different direction anyway. So they can shoot each other as much as they like in the Middle East or in Ukraine or whatever. It's got nothing to do with me. That's And I mean, I'm sounding a bit cynical now. I don't really mean to be cynical. Of course, we have compassion for them and we do what we can, but you realize that your future is not determined by what happens in the world. Yeah.
Sorry to have to ask another one.
Yeah.
Okay. This gradual path can continue the next life, probably, especially you reach the first stage, correct?
If you what?
Reach the first stage,
Yeah.
you don't go backwards. So as an Ajahn in your practice, do you have any preference to be in the heavenly realm in the next life if you don't make it to the final, or in human realm for the practice to finish?
Yeah. The Buddha doesn't say anything about this in the sutta. So there's nothing there which says that we should choose one over the other. He just says you go according to your karma. And in any case, I don't know exactly how you would choose it, because it's not obvious how you would do that. You know, if you start at kind of you're on your deathbed, you think, oh, I must become a human being. I must become a human being. But deep inside, you actually want to become a deva, because devas have a lot of fun, right? They enjoy themselves or whatever. And so you get this conflict within on your deathbed, and you end up messing everything up, and you end up as a ghost. Yeah. so that's the problem, right? Is that basically I don't think that there is any fail-safe way of ensuring that. And I think that this Buddhist idea that it's better to become a human being than to become a deva, actually the Buddha never says that. This is more like a Buddhist cultural idea rather than actually an idea coming from the suttas. And so I say, on your deathbed, relax, yeah? Enjoy the journey, be mindful, be clear, have some good friends around to tell some funny jokes or whatever, remind you of the good things, and just kind of enjoy the journey. Usually, when we come to the end of our life, the body is kind of failing, and actually, it's quite nice to get rid of the body. Yeah? For good people, the experience of dying is usually a positive one, and so just enjoy the journey. Yeah.
Hello, Ajahn
Hello.
Brahmali. I'm an aspiring Buddhist fellow member.
Expiring.
I'm an aspiring one,
Yeah.
not engaged,
Aspiring.
not committed yet.
Okay. Not
Yeah.
expiring, but aspiring. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
listening and learning
Yeah.
the Dhamma
Good.
here at Buddhist Fellowship. Yeah, so today, very inspiring talk by yourself.
Okay, great.
Okay, regarding the topic on no harsh speech, on speech, no harsh speech, no divisible speech. no talking nonsense.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and say pleasing things, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But in daily life, we hear a lot of complaints and gossips.
Yep.
Yeah. How do we address this and handle it? Yeah.
Okay. So one of the important things is to remember that there's always going to be people like that in the world. Yeah, people who gossip or people who complain. There's always going to be a lot of people like that because that's how the majority of people tend to be and how they think. So this is one of the reasons why we have a Buddhist community, because it allows you to have spiritual friends, and they will condition you in a different way from most other people in the world. This is the great benefit of being a monastic in a nice monastery. It's a great benefit of having a beautiful community like the Buddhist Fellowship, people coming together. And it means that you choose your friends wisely. It's one of the things the Buddha talks about in the suttas, choosing wise friends rather than choosing foolish people. This is number one. Number two is that those people in the world who say things that are silly or useless or whatever, have compassion for them, because very often they are trapped in that way of thinking, trapped in that kind of way of speech. It's very hard for them to be different. I just know, I think everyone knows this from their personal experience, that to become a different person, to change yourself, is actually very difficult. And most people are not even committed to changing, let alone, if you try to change, it's hard enough, but they're not even committed to changing, which makes it impossible. And so for that reason, don't judge them. Know that they are trapped. Have compassion for them instead. Reduce your contact with them so you're not affected so much. Okay, you still have to be with them a little bit because that's life, but reduce your contact a little bit so you can be more pure in your own heart and do things in the right way. And gradually you can grow in good qualities by relating to these people in the appropriate way. And that's kind of my brief answer to that question. Does that work for you? Yeah? Okay, good. Great. Okay, maybe one last question, and then we can take a break. Yeah.
Yes, Ajahn, just circling back to train our mind to be mindful at the moment of our death. And I've seen people who are at the last moment of their death, or not only their bodies are failing, but their mind also. They're probably in a coma, or you really don't know if they can hear you or not. How strong can a mind be when our human body is failing us like so? And when, also the second question is, does it mean that when people pass away during their death, they actually pass that, what kind of 𝑐𝑢𝑡𝑖 that they bring to the next life if they pass in their death? Thank you.
Okay. So the answer is that the mind is often trapped in the body. The body is sick. It doesn't mean that the mind necessarily is very sick, because like dementia is a physical illness, not an illness of the mind. As soon as the body dies, the mind is released, then the mind is okay again. It's because the physical body is sick. And many other illnesses as well, even things like schizophrenia and these kind of things, are physical disease. There's an chemical imbalance in the brain, which causes you to hear voices or whatever. And as soon as the mind is released from the body, usually the mind becomes clear again. Maybe not in all cases, but usually that's the case. And so so when someone is dying, you stay with them, you encourage them, you talk to them. Very often they can hear you, even if they are in a terrible state, even if they're in coma, something will go in. So always be encouraging, always be positive, be there to support them, hold their hand or whatever else it is that you know when someone is dying like that. The 𝑐𝑢𝑡𝑖 idea, that's a kind of an Abhidhamma idea, which means that the last mind moment, 𝑐𝑢𝑡𝑖, is followed by the patisandhi vijnana, the reconnecting consciousness. And the way I understand the suttas, there is actually an intermediate existence between the two. So you die, then there is an intermediate existence, and then you get reborn later on. And so there isn't really a chuti chitta. There isn't like a last mind moment that is very important. Dying is more like a process. It's a gradual thing, a gradual fading away, a gradual release from the body. And then you go into an intermediate existence, a bit like you can hear about in the near-death experiences. And during that near-death experience, that's when you have a life review. You look at how you lived your life, and then you judge yourself either good or bad, depending on that life review. And then you get reborn accordingly. So people who are dying, be with them. The mind is often there behind the scenes, still able to hear you. Say nice things to them. Remind them of the good qualities they have. Thank you for doing these kind things to me. They can feel good about their dying process. And then when they move on, they're likely to move in the best possible way as a consequence. Is that helpful? Does that answer your question? Yeah. 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 It doesn't matter, because if your physical body is failing, if you can do a lot now, you have to do it while you're healthy, and you do as much as you can. You practice to the best of your ability, and then when your body gets very sick, then you will be fine. So it's not. The point is not so much that you are able to deal with it right there and then, because if the body fails, well, it will affect the mind as well. But as soon as you are released from that body, you will be okay. That's the point. And all of those good qualities that you develop now will be very, very helpful once you get to that particular point. However, thank you so much. So let's have a break, because I think we need a break now before it gets too much. So let's have a break until 3:30, and we'll see you back in here again at 3:30.